The path of the righteous man is beset on all sides by the iniquities of the selfish and the tyranny of evil men. For most, these words evoke a specific image: Samuel L. Jackson in Pulp Fiction, delivering a sermon of cinematic vengeance before a hail of gunfire. But on April 15, 2026, those same words echoed through the Pentagon. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth delivered a modified version of that monologue, swapping Hollywood's righteous man for a downed aviator and the Lord for a military call sign. To understand why a 30-year-old movie script has suddenly appeared in an official military briefing, we have to examine the widening gap between the administration's words and the current state of the war. Subscribe and join us as we look at the mechanics of this shift. When government communications adopt the structure of a Hollywood screenplay, the narrative purpose shifts from informing the public to entertaining them through a specific lens. While the rhetoric turns cinematic, the physical conflict is grounded in high-stakes destruction. Recent strikes have successfully hit major energy hubs, including the Haifa oil refinery in Israel and the South Pars gas fields. The impact of those strikes is being felt at every American gas station. Prices have surged 90 cents since the war began, with a gallon of regular now averaging nearly $4. At $200 billion, the Pentagon's new funding request dwarfs domestic spending, adding massive weight to the budget. This financial cost pairs with shifting security at home, as unidentified drones are spotted near military bases and the residences of key secretaries. The claim that this is a small price to pay now collides with the daily reality of record gas prices and domestic security alerts. As factual updates on the war become more difficult to sell, the administration has pivoted away from standard geopolitical briefings in favor of something much more visceral. Defense Secretary Hegseth has led this shift, labeling reporters as Pharisees, the biblical scholars who opposed Jesus, and demanding that the press express gratitude for the war effort rather than questioning it. President Trump has leaned into this messianic framing, sharing AI-generated images on social media that depict him bathed in light and embraced by Jesus, casting the conflict as more than a matter of policy. This rhetoric has sparked a public feud with the American-born Pope Leo XIV. The Pope's criticism of leaders who spend billions on war instead of peace has led to a direct and unprecedented clash between the White House and the Vatican. By leveraging religious imagery and fighting with the Pope, the administration is attempting to rebrand an expensive, expanding war into a divine crusade that is beyond the scope of traditional political debate. In political science, this is known as entity framing. It is the practice of using specific names and titles to influence how the public perceives a person's authority and status. Hegseth's unofficial use of the title Secretary of War, a position that hasn't existed in the U.S. government since 1947, is a calculated application of this framing, designed to project a level of command that his actual title doesn't carry. Critics and media figures like Anderson Cooper have responded with their own framing, using the nickname Pentagon Pete to strip away that projected authority and cast the defense secretary as a less serious figure. The Pulp Fiction prayer follows this same logic. Swapping God's vengeance for the call sign Sandy 1 uses cinematic language to reposition the military as a force of righteous, inevitable justice. This framing recasts the U.S. military as a cinematic force of vengeance, a narrative that replaces the complicated, bureaucratic reality of a modern war. While this crusade-style narrative may rally a specific base, it is having the opposite effect in broader American culture. Late-night hosts like Stephen Colbert have begun dismantling the administration's cinematic framing, turning the Pentagon's use of movie scripts into a source of public mockery. Comedians like Jimmy Kimmel are highlighting the absurdity of the administration's recent choices, from a Catholic convert vice president lecturing the Pope to a Secretary of Defense quoting Pulp Fiction at the podium. When the gap between a government's rhetoric and the public's reality becomes too wide, even the most aggressive framing begins to feel surreal, shifting the image of strength into one of incompetence. Outside the studio and the Pentagon briefing room, the actual conflict continues. Carriers are launching sorties, and the human and material stakes of the war remain unchanged. As this graph shows, the measurable costs of the war, gas prices, military spending, and regional stability are all moving in a clear, aggressive direction. These numbers remain completely unaffected by the administration's use of religious imagery or cinematic dialogue. The reliance on movie scripts is a signal that the administration's primary focus is now on managing the narrative, even as the real-world costs of the conflict continue to climb.